Welcome everyone into a fresh, fun, new, different episode of KSR's Zoom Action. As always, I'm Zach Gagan, joined above me by Brandon Ramsey. You're used to seeing our two faces, but for this, oh, look at you, Brandon. Did you do that on purpose? Can I do that too?
Thumbs up.
The little thumbs up. But now,
Oh, look at that.
what the hell is happening? Brandon Ramsey with the technology over there. This is going to be a fun episode. I'm already looking forward to it. But if you all haven't noticed already, we have a third guest, usually operating behind the scenes. His name is Stephen Peak. I think you all have probably heard of him before. I have. Big fan of Stephen Peak over here. I think we all are. But for today's episode of Zoom Action, this is kind of like our end of season wind down, recap, look forward type thing. So mainly we're doing this because we're not doing any film breakdowns today. I'll go ahead and get that out of the way. And the reason we're doing that is because the NCAA would like come to our house, knock down the door, arrest Steven, put him in handcuffs. And while that would be great video, yes, and while that would be great video, we don't want to do that. We do not want to get any red flags on our YouTube page. So we're going to avoid all that stuff. And who wants to watch that Iowa State game anyways? Like if you want to watch Ortega's game winner, go do that. We don't need to break that one down. But so so this is going to kind of be an informal episode where we got a couple of general topics laid out here, and we're just going to kind of riff about them, talk about them, discuss about them. We'll take a few questions from the people in the comments, so make sure to drop those in there. We'll probably do that closer to the end. But yeah, we're just going to spend the next hour kind of talking about how the season ended and what needs to change going forward, what needs to happen, roster needs, stay-go decisions, all that fun stuff. But before we really dive into the weeds, we gotta pay the bills, and one of the bills that I have to pay is my KU bill. So we're gonna go ahead and shout them out. They've been a great sponsor with us pretty much all season long here for Zoom Action. LG&E and KU know that when the lights go out, it can feel like a full court press, but staying in the know is an easy win. Update your phone number in the LG&E and KU mobile app or in my account. If the power goes out, you'll get play-by-play text from 454-358 with outage updates, safety information, and time estimates for power restoration. If you can't text, that is not a problem. They'll call the landline on your account with the same updates, so you're never left in the dark, because in the dark there's no defense. But with LG&E and KU, you'll always got a team working to get the lights back on and let you know the game plan. Update your number today at lge-ku.com/outages. All right. As I come back from the ad read, I see my big face there. All right, so let's go ahead and just kind of jump right into it here. This is gonna be kind of the lightest part of the episode. We're gonna just kind of put a little bit of a bow on the 2025-26 season. Not talk about it too much. We obviously know how it all played out. Expectations were not met. But Brandon and Steven, I kind of just want to know, because Brandon, I don't think I've really gotten to hear your experience of being in the NCAA tournament. I know you were down there with Steven and Jack and with Tyler Thompson. So I'll start with you, Brandon. Just kind of what were your general vibes of St. Louis? How fun was that first game? How disappointing was that second game? Just, give me a little taste of what you experienced down there.
St. Louis was fun. In general, we missed you at Zoom Action when we went to the zoo. That was awesome. It's funny because I wouldn't even necessarily say the Santa Clara game was fun either. It was stressful. It was close. I was surrounded by Santa Clara fans in my seat that I then may have lost my voice telling them to go back to California after we won. Not one of my finer moments, but it was enjoyable. But yeah, I mean, obviously when you hit a half-court shot like that, it's exciting. Anytime you advance in the NCAA tournament, it was exciting. But the game was stressful. And then you turn around, and I think, at least for me, and I know I'm probably a different fan than some, but one of my favorite things about sports, this is true about Kentucky football every single week, it's true about Kentucky basketball Saturdays or weekdays, whatever it is, no matter how things are going, what I love is the unknown. I love the lead up. Like, I can talk myself into anything happening on a given day. And that's what we got to experience by virtue of beating Santa Clara. Like, from the minute the clock hit zero in overtime until like the second half started against Iowa State, that is what it's all about. Like, that's what being a fan is all about. That's the part that was fun. Like, we all had a great time Saturday. We talked ourselves into how we were going to beat Iowa State. Like, that stuff is what I live for and what makes being a fan and what makes sports and competition so great. So that part was really fun. The start of the Iowa State game was awesome. Like, Kentucky came out swinging. We punched first, something we've talked about on this show from time to time. And then it was like we tied our hands behind our backs and we just let Mike Tyson go to town on us. Like it was rough there. I mean, Steven and I being similarly emotional people at times, even though we don't always show it in the same ways publicly.
Yeah, that's true. My goodness.
We funny enough, we met each other without talking in the concourse at about the same time. I left the arena with about 8 minutes to go. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there drowning my sorrows, and here walks up Stephen Peak with a camera in my face. So, and we just kept doing the math of like, we're getting outscored 60 to whatever it is over the last whatever amount of time. We're like, we know we're right. We know we're doing the math right, but we say it out loud. How is this what's happening when we were at one time like in control of this game? So it left a very sour taste, I think, in a lot of people's mouth, even though I think a lot of people, if you just would have asked them what was the goal, I think we all wanted to win a game and then see what happens against Iowa State. Then obviously with Jefferson being out, that kind of gave us maybe a little bit of additional hope. But yeah, it's just unfortunate. I think it was in a lot of ways a microcosm of the season that as soon as you get any sort of kind of good feeling about this team, they were right there around the corner to punch you right in the gut. And I think that's kind of what we felt on Sunday was you got to be excited for 24, 48 hours. And then, boy, they were there to just, kind of kick you while you're down. And it now sets up a crazy offseason, which obviously we'll be getting into here shortly as well.
Yeah, talk about false hope with that first 8 minutes of that game. It definitely did not go how everyone expected after that. And even like how that game played out the last 30 minutes, I think some of the things we'll talk about with roster needs is some of it, I think we're going to be able to relate to that last 30 minutes of things that went wrong and how Kentucky can maybe use that last 30 minutes to be like, okay, this is where we were just absolutely exploited in kind of every area of the game. Let's figure out ways to try and fix that. So, Steven, I'm going to kind of toss to you the same question. I know you've had some platforms to kind of talk about your experience already, but just go ahead and give me your general thoughts on your time in St. Louis and kind of how things ended for the Cats.
Well, I mean, we got one big moment, one that we won't forget.
Yeah,
I agree.
Wasn't lying.
That was the goal by the time we got our seed, got the opponent, it was just win a game. But of course, you go up 20-9 against Iowa State, and I started to think. I mean, I know they were 0 for 11. Iowa State was to start the game from 3, and you still felt like this game. If Kentucky's going to win, it's probably going to come down to the wire. What was Brandon? 75-45 run to close out the game.
Yeah.
Insane. Yeah, that was we were like, I kept like, that can't be right. That number can't be right. That's 30 points. That's crazy, but it was. And, it was just really at that point, when I ran into Brandon on the concourse, we saw Kentucky fans walking by, and it wasn't the same devastation that you saw, even when they lost to Tennessee in a game that they were never going to win. Like I think Kobe Brea hit the first 3 of the game, and then from that point on, it was Tennessee's game.
It was over quick.
Yeah, and you kind of knew. You knew at halftime, like, this is going to take something really special. People were still like, just, man, I love this team, and I'm just so sad that it's over. And the players were in the locker room crying. And when we went in that locker room, and I'm not like, again, I hesitate a little bit to talk about this because you don't know. I mean, there is a 15-minute gap. We don't know what happened in those 15 minutes. But if the emotions were really high as they were last year, where guys were hugging and every player had, like, eyes were red because they loved that season. They loved playing with their teammates so much, and they loved their experience so much that they didn't want it to be over. This team, I'm not saying they wanted it to be over. I just don't think anyone was like heartbroken. It almost felt like it was a job. Like, I guess I don't have to go to my job like tomorrow now, or go get up early, for practices, and then we have to travel to Chicago. Okay, well, I think I can live with that. And a lot of these guys were talking about, like, we were the fans, like, our team was like bashed by the fans all year. So you can, that stuff really got to them. It was a very different NCAA tournament loss locker room. And it reflected kind of how I was feeling. Just, it's over. That's fine. For me to not be upset about an NCAA tournament loss really felt weird. And looking back on it in hindsight is even weirder. Because, like, really, I was just okay with it. I don't like that. So that needs to change. I need to be devastated by losses again. I can't just go in expecting, oh, well, they're going to lose in the second round. So, and they did, and it's okay. That's not okay. That's not okay. If you want this to be the standard, if we want to understand the assignment, I'm not holding Mark Pope to winning national championships. Those things are lucky. But we got to start winning things again. We got to start competing for the SEC regular season championship. It was nice when we went down to Florida that we were in the running for it. But if we're all being honest on this panel right now, we never thought Kentucky was going to win the SEC regular season once the SEC play started, and they lost to Alabama and then Missouri. It was nice to have that game and have a little bit of hope, but we got to win the SEC tournament. We got to play on Sundays again, and we got to start going in the NCAA tournament with an expectation that we're going to make the Final Four, and whether you do or not is not like we need to fire Pope because he couldn't do, but we need to have the expectation. I've said before, I can live with a Sweet 16 loss, round of 32 loss if Kentucky's a 1 seed, if they've had this great regular season. But we went into this tournament with zero hope for a Final Four. I mean, when the draw came out in 2014, I actually looked at it and said, okay, you're playing Kansas State, a mid-major who is undefeated, and then Louisville, a team you beat, you can make the Elite Eight. And they did. They made the national championship game. So, like, we have to start going into these tournaments with expectations again. That was the most disappointing thing for me this season, was that I wasn't upset that they lost against Iowa State because I fully expected it, because I had no expectations by the time we got to March.
Yeah, it kind of felt like they might have felt the same as that game went along as well. I didn't really think about it, too, because I've watched the post-game locker room interview a couple of times now, Stephen, the one that you and Jack did after that Iowa State loss. And two things were like common themes throughout that from pretty much every player. One was that they wanted the team to be remembered for how resilient they were and how they never gave up. And two, for the most part, I generally agree with that, because we saw so many of those double-digit comebacks, starting SEC play down 0-2, all the injuries. Like, I think there is something to say about how they continued to fight and show up. But then there's also the games where they got blown out and never really showed up any fight and stuff like that. And then the other thing was how a lot of them talked about the social media stuff and like how fans and media were kind of bashing them and everything. And it's clear that was something that they all paid attention to. I don't know, I'm sure it was varying degrees for different players, but that was obviously something that was kind of in that locker room of like, hey, like, everyone's kind of doubting us. And maybe that goes into the resiliency factor and all that of them wanting to try and prove everybody wrong. But, they ultimately just didn't have the talent to do that in the end. So we can just go ahead and let's just put the bow on that one. I don't know unless there's any other blazing hot takes you all have about how this season kind of played out. Like you said, it was more or less what we expected going into the tournament. I kind of rather just Josh Jefferson played and they lose by 19 points instead of just getting our hopes up and having it play out the way it did. But I think where do you want to start? Do you want to start with what needs to change? What needs to change with the off season? Like, what they need to go after, or should we start with like the stay go stuff, like guys that we should stay? Any particular path you all want to go?
I want to hear, Zach. I want to hear your stay-go thoughts to get us started.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's start there. So let me go ahead, and I've got the roster pulled up from this past season. And obviously, Ortega and Denzel, they're gone. There's two seniors here. They're graduating. They're out of the picture. So after that, you've got Colin Chandler, Malachi Moreno, Andrea Yelovich, Mo Diabate, Cam Williams, Brandon Garrison, Trent Noah, Jalen Lowe. I think and Jasper Johnson. That's 9 guys right there. 9 guys. And then you also have Reese Potter and Braden Hawthorne. That's 11 guys. That's 11 guys that can all theoretically come back. Braden Hawthorne has essentially said that he wants to come back. That was still during the season, so we'll see. Jack Pilgrim kind of broke the news that Reese Potter is locked in. He wants to come back. But those were 2 redshirt guys. Yeah. So, I mean, hey, roster retention, it goes from top to bottom a little bit.
Well, I'm starting to feel better, Zach.
I know it's sarcastic stuff, but in a sense, it is nice to at least have guys like that are willing to come back. And at least with Braden Hawthorne, you can kind of talk yourself into him potentially being some sort of piece, if not next year, maybe the year after or something like that. I'm always kind of the belief that Braden Hawthorne is still a year away from being a year away. And I don't know how many years that's going to continue until he's a year away. So we'll see what happens in the offseason with him. But then, so take away those 2 guys. So that's 9 guys from last season's roster that can theoretically come back with eligibility left. 2 of those are Kentucky kids, or 3 of them in Malachi, Trent, and Jasper Johnson. If we're going to try and prioritize, that's, I guess where I'll start, of priority guys that I want to see come back. I have not been shy about my feelings on Malachi Moreno. I think you make him priority 1A, 1B. You bring him back no matter what you can. It sounds like those conversations are ongoing, according to the reporting from KSR's Jack Pilgrim. We'll give him another shout out as well for that. And I think with that's just going to be a situation of, let's try it, as long as the money is right, I think Malachi's going to be back. And I think I kind of talked about it on the happy hour show yesterday, Steven. I don't know if you were listening to that with us or not for that, but I was basically saying, I hated how the last month of the season ended for Malachi, because he went from being a guy who was a 3rd string center to, obviously 3rd string with an asterisk because the starting center didn't play until December. But that was the initial role for him as a 3rd string center, won the starting job 5 games into the season, whatever it was. Went on to post a couple doubles, was averaging double figures against big opponents, had hit the shot against LSU, had that big double against Florida. Just genuinely showed himself to be, was on NBA draft boards. Steven, I was sending it to you all season long. I was not making this stuff up. It was fact. He was a guy that was on the draft radar. Not to say that he was a 1st round lock. I never even once said that I think he's going to go to the NBA or is a 1st round pick. My general point was that the kid is talented enough to potentially be an NBA player sooner than a lot of people think. Then went on to be all SEC freshman. And just the last month of the season just kind of ran out of gas, for whatever reason, multiple things. I mean, the guy did keep getting hit in the face over and over throughout the season. I mean, who knows? He's a good player. He is a good player who's only going to get better. Go watch some 7-footer for a mid-major and watch them. You try and run up and down the basketball floor, and you'll understand how rare it is for a 7-footer to have touch and feel like Malachi Moreno does. So I'm not necessarily worried. I think he's just a big offseason in the weight room away from really becoming a special player. There are flaws with his game. I'm not going to sit here and deny that at all, but he's number 1A for me, with a bullet. You got to bring him back. You got to not necessarily build your roster on him, but he's got to be your starting center, and you kind of piece things around him a little bit with him in mind. And I think Pope even said something along the lines of or I don't remember who, but it was in Jack's piece of basically saying that they want to get the ball in Malachi's hands more, do more zoom action stuff with him, make him more of a hub of the offense. I think he's capable of doing that stuff. And then after that, I think you can kind of pick and choose which guys. I think us 3 would kind of be in agreement that you want to bring back Colin Chandler. You probably want to bring back Cam Williams. I think those 2 in particular are guys that you want to keep because they are still young. They've still got room to grow. Obviously, Colin Chandler especially has improved from year over year. I think he's still got a little bit of ways to go in his development before he gets to be the player that he can be. And I think that's good for Kentucky because I think a lot of that will happen here. It's clear that he likes Mark Pope. Then you get into the bigs where it's Mo Diabate, Yelovich, Brandon Garrison. I'm all in on bringing Mo back if he wants to come off the bench and be a 20-minute per game guy again. I think if you can get Mo Diabate to do what he did the last month of the season throughout the whole course of a season, I know that's a big if there, but that would be awesome for him. Yelovich, if he's not making shots, I'm not entirely sure how big of a factor he really is. I know he's a good rebounder and he's big body and stuff like that, but he needs to make more shots. And then you go into the Trent Noah, the Jasper Johnson, who else am I missing here? I think I might've touched on everyone at this point. Jalen Lowe. I mean, hell, you've got that's going to be a very interesting one of what you do with Jalen Lowe. Cause he obviously did not get a fair shake here with how everything played out. He got hurt in the blue-white game for crying out loud and then just was never the same guy. So I think it starts with Malachi, and then after that, you start to prioritize guys like Cam and Colin Chandler, and then for me, it'd be Mo Diabate. And then after that, you can kind of go down the list of okay, who actually wants to be here? If Jasper Johnson wants to be here and he can actually play in the role that he was meant to play in, which is off ball, come around screens, get the ball, or try and get downhill really quick, like not be the point guard. I'm all for that. But you just have to have, like, I'm convinced that they need 3 ball handlers in the portal next season or this offseason. Because Denzel was basically your only guy, unless Colin Chandler takes a huge leap with his ball handling.
No.
You're going to need someone. Yeah,
Like,
Steven's already not a big fan of that
I
idea.
mean, like I like Colin, love him as a shooter. Need a ball handler.
Got to work on that. Well, that it goes back to my Iowa State point of what I mentioned earlier. Is like Colin Chandler. Like, I'll pick on him for a second. There was a point where he picked up the ball the second he crossed half court and just let a double team trap come to him in that second half against Iowa State. It's like, come on, like. Iowa State's sole purpose was to try and make you pick up the ball and make bad passes because they're going to overplay everything. And Iowa State was really able to exploit that. So, and I even said it on the happy hour yesterday, like, you're probably going to have to go out and get 2 guys that are better than Otega Oweh and Denzel Aberdeen in the portal. That's going to be hard to do. Like, it can be done. And I think it kind of has to be done. And I think ultimately it will be done. Maybe better than Otega.
Don't get it.
Yes. Yeah. The money's all it costs, and they've got plenty of it. But like with Otega, like you can find someone as good as Otega. They just have to have a different skill set. Like if you can get an Otega level player, but they're like a really good ball handler too, like then that changes things a little bit. But you got to get a guy that's better than Denzel Aberdeen. Is that guy just happened to be Jalen Lowe? Maybe. I think that's probably the hope. But then yes, I think, and that was my next point, Steven, is ultimately you just have to go out and get some more shooters. Like Colin Chandler, Cam Williams, they can shoot the ball. You got to go get more guys than that. I don't even know what to do with Trent Noah. Like, does he just want to come back and be the 12th man for the 3rd straight season? Maybe he does. And maybe he's totally fine with that. And if he actually comes in and hits shots, then that's a perfect role for him. But you're going to need guys out there that can actually come in and hit shots. I don't think that's, I just bragged on Mo Diabate. I don't think that's him, but I don't think that's the role you want him for, even though I still love him for what he does elsewhere. Andrei Yelovich didn't prove that he can really hit threes. What do you do with Brandon Garrison? Do you want him to come back and be the backup center again? Like, there's an argument to be made that you're not going to find any better backup centers in the portal than a Brandon Garrison. And how the way he kind of had his ups and downs the last month, but there were moments sprinkled in there where he was playing his best basketball of the season. Like probably 3 times in the final month, he played his best basketball of the season. So again, a big if of like all this stuff carrying over. Maybe the chemistry was just starting to hit. But that's just my long-winded way of saying, like, there's really only probably 4 or 5 guys I'd really try and prioritize bringing back and focusing on bringing back, and then try and round everything out throughout the portal. And then, you also have this whole Mason Williams factor. Mo Williams kid, is he a potential commitment as well? Yeah, he's probably not somebody you're going to bring in as PG1 right away. But if he's a reliable backup and you can slide him in for 10 minutes a game and not have to force Jasper Johnson to do that, then you can talk me into that as well. But
doesn't it sound like you're replacing like that he kind of fits the player that Jasper was this year? Like, do we need 2, or do we need 2 of those kind of guys?
A lot of what I'm saying, there's a lot of ifs and buts mixed into all the stuff I'm saying. And that's because I don't really, it was just a very confusing roster and a very confusing season. And I do believe that roster retention is important. You're going to want some of it, but how much of that roster retention do you really want when that was kind of the result of how the season went? But you got to bring some guys back. You got to bring, because there was only 4 guys back from last season's team. So you've already got 2 kind of locked up with Hawthorne and Potter. But those guys don't really play too much. Can you bring in all these other guys? It sounds like Cam Williams wants to stay, just from what he was talking about in that end of season press conference. Sounds like he wants to come back. Colin Chandler, I can't really see him going anywhere either. But those are kind of your top guys. And if you can lock down Malachi, then you can start building around from that. It just stinks that your 2 best players happen to be the 2 guys that left as well. So I'll go ahead and swing it over to Brandon here and let him kind of chit chat about what his general thoughts are on the stay go, and you bounce off anything I said if you want to, or go completely different direction. Just what are your general thoughts on the guys on those 11 guys that can come back? That's 11 guys. That's a lot of guys. That's a full starting roster and then a starting 5 to come off. That's 11 guys that can all come back. Obviously, all of them are not going to come back, but just Brandon, what are your general thoughts now that we're a week removed from the end of the season?
So as I was walking up the stairs to get out of Enterprise Arena and walk around the concourse as a sad human being, as we're watching the season end, I'm texting my dad. I'm thinking about it. I think I even said it to Steven of like, quite frankly, I could care less who comes back. And in the moment that was emotional, and it is what it is. I no longer feel that way, but there is a little bit of like, if anybody starts next season in the same role that they're in right now, I'm not sure that I'm going to be super excited. Now, that doesn't mean that retention isn't super important, because I think that it can play a role in that. But I think where I'm getting at is like, there's not going to be anybody who, if you don't bring them back, I'm going to sit here and like lose a lot of sleep over. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh my gosh, how do we go into next year without bringing back this person? I mean, in Coach Pope's first season, when he took the head coaching job, it was a complete roster overhaul. There was nobody on the roster, and he built an entire roster. And quite frankly, that team worked out better than this past team that had a little bit of retention. So like
The team also had some severe limitations, to be fair.
it 100% did, and this team did too. So I'm not afraid of a rebuild. Now, am I saying that's what I want? No. But if it ends up being that, I'm going to find some positives in that, quite frankly. Now, as I calmed down, and as we are a week removed, and it's why I always preach, like, nothing smart really ever gets said in the immediate moments after a season ends. That's why I didn't say any of that publicly, luckily. But I think that, and I've said this publicly, and I took plenty of heat for it, but Kentucky had a star problem. They didn't have a lot of these other pieces. Like, yeah, I can be frustrated with some of what Malachi Moreno is, and I can have some questions of like, gosh, does a Final Four team have a starting center as Malachi Moreno next year? Is Colin Chandler good enough? Cam Williams good enough? All these different things. Well, I think they can be good enough if your couple best players look like what we need them to look like at Kentucky. And again, like, you have to be careful the way you talk about things, because people interpret things how they want to interpret them. But like, yes, thank goodness this team had Otega Owe. Thank goodness this team had Denzel Aberdeen. But also, what we got was with them as our guys. And I think that's what you would get in most iterations of this. Like, if you simulated this season 15 times with Otega Owe and Denzel Aberdeen as your two best players, I think you're going to have a lot of round of 32 exits. And I think that if you can upgrade those spots, which is not easy because those guys are good. Like, it's like what I've said all year. Like, there's a lot of worse things in the world than being the 25th best team and making a round of 32. It just stinks specifically at Kentucky. Like, in the grand scheme of the world, it doesn't really stink. It stinks at Kentucky. So you have to go out and you have to hit right on those big home run swings, because then that is what allows you to retain these guys and let them develop in their roles. Like, if you have an All-American 3-man and you have a dynamic point guard, then I'm a lot more excited about Malachi Moreno, a lot more excited about the catch and shoot abilities of Cam Williams and Colin Chandler. But if I'm not sold on our best player and second best player, then quite frankly, a lot of the brunt of it's going to end up falling on those guys that return, because they're not going to be good enough if you don't bring in stars. And at Kentucky, that shouldn't be our issue. Like, getting stars, for as long as the three of us have been fans, that really hasn't ever been the problem. Is like at times having too much star power used to be what we worried about, and now it's like, can we get one of the best freshmen? Can we get one of the best portal names? Can we have an NBA draft pick? Like, those are now the conversations we're having, and that is frustrating. And I don't necessarily think that Tyron Stokes is the answer to everybody's problems either. He would certainly help, and he would certainly help just fan sentiment. But I think it's going to be, you have to find a couple guys in the portal that are going to be like, I want a preseason All-American on next year's team. I want another guy who people talk about like, wow, yeah, Kentucky wasn't messing around in the portal. They went and got 2 of the 8 or 10 best available guys. And now, with some pieces that you brought back, you feel pretty good about. So that's really where I'm at in terms of stay or go. Is like, I'm much more interested in who stays if you go out and hit home runs. Now, to talk specifically real quick about the stay or goes, yes, I agree with you. Malachi Moreno probably is your number one priority. I think that he is a good center. You saw it at times. I mean, his offensive rebounding was pretty impressive this season. His shot blocking even at times was pretty. I mean, he was like top 50 in individual block rate according to KenPom. That's pretty darn good for a freshman. I think he has a lot of upside as a passer. What we were talking about with him serving as a hub to some zoom action stuff. I think honestly, if you'd let him do that more and make him bang around inside less, I actually think you probably get a better version of Malachi Moreno.
Yeah,
doing that. From there, absolutely. Shooting is at a premium. We know that. I want Colin Chandler and Cam Williams back as catch and
shooters.
And then from there, yeah, I'm completely with you. Like out of the threesome of Brandon Garrison, Andrea Yelovich, and Mo Diabate, I probably want at least one of those guys back. I almost don't really even care who it is because I can get sold on each of them in different ways. Like if it's Mo Diabate, I'd be really excited if he's your backup, and then you go get a big time, stretch four. If you bring back Brandon Garrison, like I think then you're kind of set at the 5 spot next year with Malachi and BG. If it's Yelovich, I think he gives you some upside as maybe that catch and shoot 4-man. But I think overall, and this is true whether it's Jasper, heck, even if it's Malachi, I think a lot of these off-season talking points, and it goes back to why I'm not afraid of a rebuild, is that, and it's the case with 2026, like value has so much to do with this also. Like there's a lot of guys I'm interested in them coming back, but I'm interested in them coming back at a certain price and in a certain role. Like it's not just in a vacuum. Like if Malachi Moreno wants to come back and like be told that we're going to throw it to him in the post 15 times a game and he's going to make $4 million, I'm going to have a hard time getting excited about that. Like
Fair.
If Mo Diabate says, yeah, I'll make $500,000 and be your backup 4-man, I'm super excited. If he says I want to start at the 4 and make $2.5 million, I'm not as excited. And like he's the same person. He just becomes, his value changes, and that's a new part of college basketball that you have to weigh. So I think that's going to be a big part of it too. Is that even the guys I want back, I really only want them back in certain roles and at certain prices. Prices assuming we don't just have unlimited money. If we have unlimited money, then quite frankly, I could care less how much any of them make. I hope we pay everybody $10 million and we just get the Moncars and let's run it out there. But yeah, I think that's where I'm at. I think that retention is going to be part of this. But quite frankly, if you don't upgrade on your 2 best players, then who you bring back is going to become largely irrelevant, because then we're just going to be we're going to be in the Sweet 16 round of 32 boat that we've been in.
Yeah, you bring back a bunch of guys to finish 9th in the SEC.
Right.
Well, and before I let you go, Steven, like Brandon, you mentioned like being in a vacuum. Like in a vacuum, Colin Chandler's a player that you'd want to bring back. Cam Williams in a vacuum is a good player you want to bring back. But a lot of it is going to come down to who's around them. Like, do you want Colin Chandler playing 33 minutes a game again next season? You probably don't. And that's not even like a shot at him for any like of his talent deficiencies or what he's good at and stuff like that. It's just, you want someone else around him who can help soak up some of those shots and that playing time, who can not make you just don't want the ball to be in Colin Chandler's hands that often. And like, who's a guy that's going to be able to get Cam Williams open for all these shots? Like, in a vacuum, those guys are good, but how do they fit within the system here? And I think a lot of that will just depend on who goes around them in the portal, whether that is, like someone like Jalen Lowe. Like, I think there is a big question mark with Jalen Lowe and how you do, like, I mean, that's a big, like, because he's an expensive portal player. Like, if he goes, he's going to get money elsewhere. And, if he stays, he'll be expensive to keep around and stuff like that. And we never really saw exactly what he's really good at or what he actually looks like in this system. So, but Steven, I'll let you go ahead and give us your general thoughts on anything that you want to talk about with State Ghost.
We're all in the same boat right now. There are a lot of people that have no idea. How about this? You have no recruits. You have no idea who is coming back. You don't have the money you had a year ago. You do not. Now, all of a sudden, you're trying to keep guys, figure out who else is out there and wants to come and wants to put like a bidding war, which Arkansas wouldn't be involved in. Sorry, I was quoting the great John Calipari right there. I don't know who he was talking about, but it did fit Kentucky's situation.
It did fit Kentucky, yes. I think there's a lot of teams that falls under the umbrella under, but yes, Kentucky did fit the
one of them,
the scenario he was talking about.
So it's not the ideal situation. We left last season knowing that we were going to have to do a lot of bring in more portal pieces because the guys you brought in were seniors. But man, the optimism that I had that Pope could do it because he just did. And that team was good. Last year's team was really good. They beat 2 Final Four teams. If they stayed healthy, they're probably a 2 seed. They probably make the Elite 8. They avoid Tennessee for the 3rd time. And like that team, the way that team played was just so much more entertaining. I could just like the losses.
It was Pope's system. It was.
Yeah, and he didn't run it this year. So I just feel like if you're going to run this back with too many of the guys that I'm not hating on any of these players. Pope went out and signed good players. He did. Those were good players. Mo Diabate.
In a vacuum.
They were all good. They were individually good. They just didn't fit what Kentucky what Mark Pope wanted to do. He talked about shooting 35 threes. Did we shoot 30 threes?
22 was the average this season. 22 a game
so
was the
13
average.
Below what he wanted. So in his head,
it's below the national
average. He had a completely different plan. And he had to switch it up somewhere around that North Carolina game. They shot 10 threes. They made 1. It was just a completely different style of play and a whole new strategy for what we wanted to do. So whatever this stay-go decisions, whatever Mark Pope, whoever he wants to bring back, I'm going to trust him. I'm going to trust Keegan Brown. I'm going to trust this coaching staff that that they have to get the guys that can play this offense. He did it his first year. He's got to do it again in year 3 because this is a very critical year 3. And I don't think, unfortunately, you're going to be able to bring back a lot of these guys. If you're going to bring back Malachi and you're going to spend a lot of money on him, I love Brandon Garrison won Kentucky that Santa Clara game in multiple ways. The timeout, the block, the dunk. He had several.
He was huge in all of March. He had big
starting
games.
1 through 5. Like he was great enough to beat Santa Clara. So, like, I guess what I'm saying is if you're going to have Malachi, then I love BG, man. I do. His mom is great. He's a good person. We're going to miss having his son at some of the games and getting to see him. But if you can't run it back with these 2 bigs, and I think Malachi has the bigger upside, so you'd want to bring him back. And if I just don't think you can bring too many of these pieces back and expect to do what you did in 2024, 2025. So that's where I'm at. Let's bring in the guys that can run the offense that got you to where you were top 25 all season long, top 10 until guys got hurt, and let's see what happens. And like all the stuff about getting tougher and all that stuff, that may have been true, but I keep thinking about how we wanted to get tougher because of the way Alabama just ran us off the floor in that SEC tournament. And like, with all due respect, Travis Perry was guarding Mark Sears. I can't get that image out of my head. And that, to me, was like, well, maybe if you had Lamont Butler, you would have seemed tougher. So let's just get the guys that you can have that 2024-25 style roster. If Jackson Robinson was the star, find somebody who's just a little bit better than Jackson, and I think you got something there. I really do.
I want to say one thing real quick. I want to say one thing.
Go for
it. Somebody, I literally thought it was like a troll account, but they said the most profound thing to me on Twitter a couple weeks ago, and what Steven just touched on, I think it made me think of it, of like, this talk about toughness, and this team, a lot of times this year, like, we've questioned effort, we've questioned how together they are, and different things like that. And this person on Twitter said something to me that literally has stuck with me, and I'm going to steal it for the rest of the time. And they said that when you start talking about effort and toughness, usually talent is the problem. And I was like, that is like incredibly profound. That, like, and I've said it at different times too. Like, a lot of people, with Twitter fingers or whatever, like, it's easy for the common fan to just be like, things aren't going well. Well, like, I don't know how they're guarding the ball screen, so it must be an effort thing. Like, it kind of takes a basketball nerd to like actually break down the basketball. But like, right. Everybody feels like they're qualified to break down effort because we all have jobs and we all, have to work hard on a daily basis. But when he said that, I was like, holy cow, that's like a sweet quote. Maybe he stole it from somebody too, but but yeah, I kind of think that's something that we need to think about going forward, is that when you start questioning effort, when you start questioning toughness, usually talent is your problem.
Yeah, and I mean, we a lot of the stuff we talked about was some of the effort throughout the Zoom action episodes where, the 3-point defense, like, it just didn't feel like they had the effort there. Maybe they just didn't know how to do it. Just not good enough basketball players to do it. But that's a whole different tangent. I don't want to get too front of it. But Steven, I do want to come back to a point you just made. There's a battle of, like, okay, are you going to find a better backup center in the portal than Brandon Garrison? Probably not. But is the combination of Malachi Moreno and Brandon Garrison one that can take you to a Final Four? Well, judging off last season, maybe not. A lot of that might depend on who's around them, who's getting the ball. Like, I'm sure Brandon Garrison and Malachi Moreno's life would be a lot easier if Jalen Lowe was getting on the ball all season long, instead of having to have Denzel Aberdeen learn how to play point guard in the middle of January, which, again, to his credit, he did. Like, I cannot believe that Denzel was as good as he was whenever he had to take over that role. But he's still not a pure point guard. He doesn't know the nuances of it like a Jalen Lowe does. And all that. But, before we move on here, I do need to get one more ad read in. So let me sneak that one in here real quick. And then we'll go on and we'll kind of talk about some of the offseason stuff, like just what we're looking for. And I'll talk about Keegan Brown for just a second as well. All right, shout out to our friends at SeatGeek. We're excited to once again have the great team at SeatGeek as KSR's official ticketing partner in March. With over 35 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. We love using SeatGeek, and we have a reason to promote it right now, because the Kentucky women's basketball team is playing in its first Sweet 16 since 2016. So it's been a full decade. They play #1 seed Texas tomorrow on Saturday in Fort Worth, so kind of a home game for them. Let's play our favorite game, though, boys. Any guesses on what a ticket, the cheapest ticket to go watch a Sweet 16 game in Fort Worth on Saturday? And this is for 2 sessions as well. So what's the lowest ticket price we think here? Give me a guess.
$130.
I mean, it's Sweet 16. That's a big deal. Fort Worth, Texas, down there in the great Lone Star State. Let's say $100.
$40 will get you
You're
both of
kidding
those
me.
sections. Yeah, they're upper level. You might be high up there in the seats, but if you're in that area and want to go check out the ladies and see if they can push themselves into an Elite Eight for the first time since whenever Matthew Mitchell was roaming the court, you can go do that over there, over with our friends at SeatGeek. They've got your back. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so you're getting a good deal. So look for the green dots. Green means good, red means bad. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And we have a special deal for you. Use code KSR10. That is KSR10. The number 10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code KSR10. Download the SeatGeek app now and take advantage. Restrictions apply. Thanks again to the team at SeatGeek for sponsoring us all of March. All right, so let's look ahead a little bit to the offseason. I will say that I think the Keegan Brown thing is going to be, I don't think that's a small note at all. I think that he was the guy that helped Mark Pope build these rosters that did shoot 33s a game. He had a big role in that, and now he's back, and that's pretty much other than not using the words general manager, that's essentially what his job is. If I'm reading all these job descriptions right, like, he's going to be doing all the stuff. A lot of roster building is what it comes to. He's going to be doing a lot of roster building, and with that comes the negotiations, the roles, things like that, figuring out which guys to get, which guys can you moneyball. They might need to try and lean a little bit into that a little bit more this year, like go and find yourself an Ainsley Almanor again in the portal if they need to, or try and round out the edges a little bit the way they did that first off season. So I do think he's important in how this roster will get built. I said it on the happy hour yesterday, like just another guy in the room to tell Pope no, to bounce ideas off of. I think that's important. You do have an assistant coach opening right now with Jason Hart gone officially to SMU. Who replaces that? What is that person's role? Like, Jason Hart was the lead recruiter, or not the lead recruiter, but a big time recruiter. Like, you can kind of point fingers at, whether or not he was actually landing players or not. I think there's a million different reasons as to why Kentucky did not land recruits. I'm sure part of it was Jason Hart. I'm sure most of it was other factors as well. So, but Jason Hart seemed like a good coach, had a long track record. So losing him is still a big deal, and how Pope replaces him will be important. So those, bringing in Keegan Brown and adding another assistant, those are pretty important offseason notes. But it's kind of hard to address the offseason needs because we just have no idea how this, like I said, 11 guys can come back. Like, I don't think all 11 are going to come back, but there's kind of some whispers that it sounds like Jasper Johnson himself might be open to coming back, trying to prove himself here in Kentucky. His big truck won't look the same if he's playing in North Carolina or Alabama. So there's a reason right there to bring it back in Kentucky. But so, and then the Jalen Lowe thing, I'll come back to that. Does he want to come back? Does he want to go try it somewhere else? Does he think that he can be the guy here? And, can they pair a guy that's as good as Otega or better than Otega Owe next to him? Can they pair two guys like that next to him? What does that look like then when Jalen Lowe's surrounded by even more talent? Because I think that was kind of the whole idea with him coming into this season is, okay, put Jalen Lowe around better talent and let's see if some of those shooting numbers tick up.
Breaking news.
Breaking news, Zach.
What am I? Hold on.
Mason Williams.
There you go. You
Mason
are
Williams.
a cat.
He's a cat.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about it, I guess, for a second here. Steven, you might have to, I don't know if they're going to do like a rapid reaction to that or something. If you have to hop off, let me know. Okay. Yeah. So Mason Williams just committed. Let's go ahead and there's an offseason need right there. There's your backup point guard, your developmental point guard, probably. I watched some of the tape. Stolen from Jackson State. Yes. The Mo Williams
got him to decommit from his dad, Zach. That's pretty big.
It's pretty good. Well, I will say Mason decommitted because he started getting bigger offers, Ole Miss, Memphis, Texas Tech. So the kid was rising in the rankings. Looking off the highlight tapes from over the summer, he played big teams like Prolific Prep. I think they played St. X. They played a lot of national quality opponents, and he performed pretty well. I know he did well at the NBPA camp, but he's still, ranked outside the top 100. So we'll see if that shoots up now that he's committed to Kentucky. I'm sure it will because some of that stuff goes. BB and Cam dropped it first. Give credit. Shout out to BB and Cam. Good eyes. I was on Do Not Disturb. I wasn't expecting that to.
And this is confirmed. There are people are wondering if we just took the stuff in the chat. We do have this. We have this confirmed.
Yeah, I got a Joe Tipton notification for it. So it's all, and Jacob's been all over that there for the last 3 days.
I texted Jacob. That's who I texted to make sure.
Yeah. Jacob's been all over that one. So I guess, Brandon, I'll just get your first initial thoughts on, I guess, Mason Williams joining. And is there any particular need in the portal that you're really looking for? Or maybe a couple of pieces that you really think, regardless of the retention of who returns and who leaves, anything in particular you're looking for there. But give me a little taste of Mason Williams if you've done any film search on him yet.
Mason Williams, I think that, inevitably outside of the fan base and heck, even within it to some extent, I mean, let's be blunt, it'll get made fun of a little bit, unfortunately, because he's not a top 100 guy. He was committed to Jackson State, but let's be realistic here. And this isn't just blue shaded glasses. He was committed to Jackson State because his NBA All-Star father is the coach there. So this is a guy that had other SEC offers. He was getting even more and more interest as things went along, and that is why he decommitted from his own father in order to open up his recruitment. Am I going to act like that he's going to come in and be the starter? No. Am I going to act like he's Darius Acuff or even Mo Williams Sr.? No, I'm not going to act like that. But we also have been, hoping and praying for a backup point guard. Well, and it's something I talked about a lot this past season was like, hey, unfortunately, in the NIL era, in the portal era, it's harder than you think to recruit a backup because why would I go somewhere to be a backup? Like, I can take money and go somewhere else and be a starter. Like, you can kind of play the musical chairs, and somebody's probably going to offer you to be a starter if you're of the quality of a player that would be a backup at Kentucky. That means you can be a starter somewhere that isn't all that bad. Well, a 4-star, 100-ish type player in the country, that is the type of guy who is probably willing to come in and for a year or two be your backup. This guy can come in and play 8 minutes a game as a freshman and be okay with it and be serviceable. He's also the son of a professional basketball player. Like, that's not a bad place to start in terms of development when you have somebody who, obviously has been around the game his whole life and has that sort of a pedigree. He's 6'2", 6'3". He's not a little guy. I think that he will be a serviceable backup point guard from day one, and that's what you're looking at. That's what you're looking to get in these positions, because it's just harder. Like, it's just really, really hard to have, like, oh well, we have a guy that was a 4-year player in the Missouri Valley that was all conference as a senior, and he's going to come be a grad transfer at Kentucky. Like that's just probably not going to happen. So you have to go get a guy like Mason Williams. So to me, this is a good backup point guard get. It's what everybody wanted. This is what you get. Now we'll move on to getting those stars, which I talked about are the important things.
Well, in theory, he can help Jasper kind of move back to a more natural position as well. If you think that Mason's ready from day one to step in and kind of be that backup point guard, then you can kind of at least see that line of thinking there too.
Absolutely. To answer the second part of that question in terms of the, what you're looking for in the portal, I mean, it's that star power, like I said, and I think that a lot of it, the conversation probably can't begin for real until you know what Jalen Lowe's doing. Like, do we have to go get a point guard? If not, and it's Jalen Lowe, then I think it really transitions to those 3-4 spots, like, getting that Otega Owe replacement and upgrading there. And then I think that something that's been an issue for 2 seasons now is that I just don't think our 4-man has been good enough. When you look across college basketball this season, and it was a big deal going into last night's games, like how big college basketball has gotten. And you look at, Yaxel Lindenborg, and you look at Caleb Wilson, and you look at Cameron Boozer. Like, these guys are skilled but huge 4-men. I think that's where you need to get your star power next season, is getting that stud 4 that can step out and shoot some threes, but also is going to help in the rebounding effort. You can throw it to it around the basket, and then getting that Otega Owe type of guy, again, a capable shooter, probably more of a physical, get to the basket sort of athlete, freak 2-way guy, and then let your Colin Chandlers and your Cam Williams be your floor spacers. But I'm really looking at the 3 and 4 spots this offseason, and I think how you fill those, especially with the question mark of Jalen Lowe still looming, how you fill those is going to probably tell you, to at least answer my question as to how the offseason went.
Yeah, I definitely think I agree with you on the forward spot for sure. I think you definitely want to upgrade that spot, and in turn, it'll just help take some of the pressure off Malachi as well, so he doesn't have to kind of carry the whole front court load, which it kind of felt like at times he had to, and maybe that's why he just kind of ran out of gas towards the end of the season. Steven, any overwhelming thoughts or overarching thoughts on Mason Williams, who I'm sure you're very familiar with already, or just any potential portal needs or anything like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen his highlight tape. Looks good, as most highlight tapes do. They do make you look good. I did like one of these comments here that said, he loved that he's been around the game.
Yeah, that's no small thing.
I think that we've kind of had this position now 3 years in a row. Travis Perry and Jasper Johnson sort of occupied this 8 to 10 minute role that I guess he's going to play. I'll delegate this to you guys. Do you think is there a potential that he's better than that? Is there because I think like that's what's kind of sticking out to me, that we're bringing in another freshman guard, kind of like Travis, kind of like Jasper was not supposed to be a point guard, but he ended up having to take on that role. Should I have more optimism about Mason Williams, that he could develop throughout the season to be a much better version than what those two had been?
Well, you might have to, unfortunately. And I mean, to be completely honest, like, I've never seen the kid play a full basketball game in person, so I honestly can't answer that question, just to be frank with you. I mean, I think that Travis Perry was an undersized point guard, and like you said, he was matched up against Mark Sears, an All-American at times. So like, he was kind of thrown into an unfair spot. Jasper Johnson was asked to play point guard, and he's not a point guard. So if this kid is actually more of a pure point guard, he's 6'2". He's listed at 170. Before the film I was looking at, like, he looks bigger than that. He looks a little bit stronger than that. So maybe he is a little bit more tailor-made, can be a little bit more prepared to take on that role. And maybe Pope is still going to go get another backup point guard. Maybe he wants, like, he basically had three. The plan was to have three of them last year, and they were all lefties. One of them decommitted. Jasper ended up not being a point guard, and Jalen Lowe got hurt. So maybe he goes out and tries it and gets a third guy. Whether if Jalen Lowe comes back or if they go out and get another PG1, then you maybe try and find another backup who's kind of at the same level as Mason Williams and can play the same amount of minutes, or maybe you can try and insulate that a little bit more and bring in more guys. But I guess that would be my answer to that question. I don't know, Brandon, if you have any different thoughts on that.
Yeah, to me, my answer would be is that, to be frank, I don't. You mentioned Travis Perry and Jasper Johnson. Neither one of those guys are point guards, in my opinion. Like
Travis Perry was not a point guard. He's just small. He was 5'10".
Perry is a catch and shoot threat, and Jasper Johnson, yeah, he's good with the ball in his hands, but he's a shoot first, score first kind of individual playmaker. From what I have seen of Mason Williams, he is a point guard who is going to distribute and handle the ball and get you into offense and facilitate. So to me, that's why you should have, if you need to have optimism about your backup point guard, to me, that's where I would have some optimism, is that I think for the first time, your backup point guard is a point guard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a good point. It'll be fun to now hopefully be able to watch some real games, or I'll go. I don't know where I'll find any film on a guy that played in the Puma League and stuff like that. So hopefully I can, do the YouTubes and figure something out there. But so Stephen, any other general off-season thoughts though on roster? Like I know Brandon's talked about trying to get a 4, someone kind of at that 2-3 spot that can take some of the load off of Colin Chandler and Cam Williams. Maybe that someone can handle the ball a little bit more when they're on the floor next to a Jalen Lowe or the other PG1. Just anything going into the offseason where you're like, I want to get this type of player?
Yeah, here's what I want. I want my 2 guard. I loved Otega. Loved Otega Owe. Otega Owe saved Kentucky and Mark Pope's ass 3 or 4 times when he was there.
Yes.
In probably more than that. I mean, just on last second shots alone, 3 times. I want a 2 guard though that can shoot the basketball. I want that to be strength number 1 for my 2 guard. Shoots the ball well. That's the top priority for what I'm looking for in a shooting guard. That's when Mark Pope's offense was humming last year. It's because you could have Amari Williams in the game who you didn't want shooting threes ever, surrounded by 4 guys who could make threes. Can we just do that? I know it's not easy to find 4 good shooters you can rely on, but can we try to do that again? That's my number 1 priority. I want shot makers, not just takers. And there are options out there. I'm watching guys who I had never heard of until I turned on the NCAA tournament, and they're just banging threes. We should be able to find a few of them. So especially with the money we got, we should be able to go out and get some good shooters. And Kobe Brea, you may not find a guy like Kobe, but you can find guys. And part of it is too, Pope talks about coaching up guys. I mean, Colin Chandler at one point this season was the best 3-point shooter in the SEC. Let's find other pieces around him like that, and let's roll. That is my number 1 priority for this team. And if you can, people are saying you might need to bring Brandon back and Malachi because you can't really replace them in the transfer portal. But is there not somebody from a Drexel out there? Is there not somebody that you could
find someone who might be worse, but with different skill sets that maybe fit Mark Pope better than someone like Brandon Garrison does?
Exactly. I mean, Amari Williams, maybe Pope never gets a guy like that again. But I'd have to think that there's got to be somebody out there that has those particular skill sets that Amari had that you can run zoom action with. And so those are my top 2 priorities: shooting guard and a big that you can really run the offense through.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you there. All right, I know that we've got one comment here that you've got starred, Stephen, one question that I definitely do want to get to, because we'll start winding things down here. I know, Brandon, I think you've got to head out semi-shortly, and I'm sure, Stephen, you've got some video stuff you got to do. But I do want to address this question from OTA123100. Can we talk about coach's defensive philosophy? What is it? Kind of a fair question, honestly, because the defense has been bad in Mark Pope's first 2 seasons, at least statistically. Like the defensive rating, here I can look at it right now. In his first season, their defensive rating finished or at least looking at conference games, in all conference games last season, the defensive rating finished in the 12th percentile. This season's team finished in the 33rd percentile, so well below average, both sides. And then the offense this season was just not as great as last season's, and that's how you get a 14-loss campaign. So the defensive philosophy, I mean, I don't really know what it is, because there was a point last season where all of a sudden the defense started playing better, and there wasn't really any one thing to point to. They just started. I really don't know. Like, even Brandon, I feel like, was kind of mystified at how that was all happening. And then this season, it did feel like the defense was kind of good to start off in the season, and then maybe trailed off a little bit and wasn't as potent as it had been earlier in the year. Brandon, that's just a good question for you. I mean, I think he's trying to maybe take a jab of, like, it doesn't feel like they have a defensive philosophy at all. But what kind of is the general idea on defense from Mark Pope? Do you anything you can pinpoint there?
He really values rim protection and protecting the paint, I would say. I mean, we hear him talk about it a lot, so that's why I feel pretty comfortable saying that. Now, maybe the product on the floor doesn't even always mirror that, but we hear him talk about all the time that the stat that's most closely correlated with winning is field goal percentage at the rim or something like that. So I think he wants to keep people out of the paint, and he wants to make it hard on you to score at the rim. To that ilk, Kentucky was 32nd in block rate this year. I mean, not outstanding, but not the worst. They were 89th in terms of 2-point defense. That's not good enough, especially if that's your plan. So, like, when you see them leave 3-point shooters and things like that, it's because, to some extent, that it is their philosophy. Like, they're being told to keep the ball out of the paint, and they're being told, like, hey, we will kind of gamble a little bit in terms of letting people shoot it from 3 at the expense of keeping them out of the paint, protecting the rim. Now, you need to be better at if you're going to trade one thing off for the other, you need to be better at the one thing than Kentucky has been the last couple of years. The one thing I will say, though, and I think it went maybe a little under the radar just because we obviously just weren't happy with the overall product this year, but Kentucky finished 28th, or I guess I shouldn't say finished because the season overall isn't over yet, but Kentucky is 28th right now in KenPom defensive efficiency. That's not bad. And where it's really not bad is that, like, this offense finished 40th. We were 10th last year in offense. The reason you hire Mark Pope is for his offensive philosophy. I think, like, if Mark Pope is going to be your coach, you should have a top 10 offense every single year. And if you have a top 10 offense and you have the 28th defense, you're going to have a chance to compete for a championship. So, like, quite frankly, this year, the defense was what it might look like if and when Kentucky competes for a championship under Coach Pope. The issue was we were 40th offensively instead of 8th. And I think that if you can fix some of that, if you can hold this defense constant, because there were times where they were able to be decent on the floor, but I really think it was the offense that was the problem this year. So, but yes, to go back to the original point and recap, I think that making it hard to score inside is what his philosophy is. Now, I think it's about kind of like his offensive philosophy. Like, okay, let's now go actually recruit to that, maybe a little bit better than we have at that point. That's the great thing about being a Division I coach. It's the great thing about having an NIL, especially to the extent that Kentucky has it. Like, you should, there's no excuse for not having the players like you want. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to get every guy that you want. You're not going to make a big board of your top 6 and get your top 6. But, like, when you're Kentucky, when you have NIL, you should be able to recruit to your philosophy better than we did this past season. That's the main thing I'm looking for. Like, even if Kentucky isn't as good as we want, I at least hope that next year it looks like what Coach Pope wants it to look like. And I think that he would be the first one to admit, quite frankly, this year we didn't get to play the way he wants to play. And quite frankly, inexcusable for the NIL world.
Yeah, and injuries obviously played a factor in that too. I feel like you and I have championed that pretty consistently throughout the season. Yep. It did it felt like his first roster. He was all in on trying to get ball movers and shot makers, and then going into year 2, he might have leaned too hard in the defense and athleticism route. And the defense was, at least by the defensive rating number, was better this season compared to last. But then the offense suffered, and that's how you just kind of get an average team in general. So, like you said, I'm sure he knows all that. He's probably going to try and find that middle ground this offseason of okay, I still need to have some of that defense and athleticism. But man, I just need guys that can shoot the ball. I need more shooters. I need a couple more guys that can handle the ball and move the ball around. So, and Steven had to leave. Steven's going to do other KSR stuff because Mason Williams just committed. So he's got to go deal with all that. And to be quite frank, I probably need to go deal with that as well. So we are probably going to go ahead and start winding things down here. Brandon, any other just general takes you want to give as we kind of jump into the offseason? Well, this will probably be our last one for, I don't know, whenever portal guys start happening and Kentucky starts landing some portal commits, we'll start doing some of the stuff we did last offseason with the deep dives and the film and stuff like that. But any general thoughts that you want to relay before we get going?
I think the main thing that I would say, and I get it, this is a famous, annoying Brandon Ramsey take that we're about to have, but a little bit of patience through the offseason, I think, is something that we can all we need, quite frankly. And I know it's not easy because this past year did not go how we want, so we want to fix it as quickly as possible. That's just human nature. But these things don't always happen quickly. And we see it every year where, guys enter the portal at different times. Guys become available at different times. The tides change in a hurry, both positively and negatively. And I think that we shouldn't get caught up in judging next year's roster until we see a roster on the website in August of next year, because you never know when that last international guy is going to pop up, or you never know when a coach is going to get fired and all of a sudden the portal reopens for a team or something like that. And I just think that you have to let it play out. You have to let these guys build it over the course of the next few months, and it might not happen as quickly as we want it to happen, but it also doesn't need to happen as quickly as we want it to happen, as long as it ultimately ends up looking like it needs to look.
And the portal also is still 2 weeks away.
10 days away from even opening, technically.
10 days away from opening. And then you've got a 15-day window where it is open and guys can jump in. It's important to know that portal window is just to jump in. It's not a commitment deadline either. So guys can obviously commit all after that. But in those 15 days, you're going to see All-American caliber players go into the portal. It's happened every offseason. It's going to continue to happen again. It's just a matter of, can Kentucky close? Can they close on these guys that they just kind of weren't able to last offseason in particular? Because the first offseason was very much just a crapshoot of putting it all together, and they did a great job, obviously. But how do they address getting those big stars? Because that's kind of, like I said, you got to get a guy that's better than Ortega Owe and Denzel Aberdeen, and those were your two best players to end the season. So if you want to have a better season next year, that's kind of where it starts. All right, I think we're gonna start. All right, we're gonna close it. So this is the last one of the 2025 season. Thanks to everyone who joined us and was able to help out and comment and subscribe and like, and make sure you do all that stuff for Steven right now while you're here. That helps him a lot. But yeah, like I said, we'll start ramping stuff up again once Kentucky gets some portal commits. We'll do some more film breakdowns, maybe do some player breakdowns on retention guys, when they bring, if a guy comes back for sure, we'll dive into the film room and focus on him for a little bit. So we'll do all that stuff, but that'll start up in April. But in the meantime, great season. Brandon, thanks as always for being my co-host next to me and just chatting it up. And I hope everyone learned a little bit more about basketball this season. I know I sure did, just sitting in these conversations with Brandon and in our group chat and all that. So, but I'll stop rambling. Thanks everyone for joining. We will see you all next time. This has been another episode of Zoom Action. We'll see you 2026-27. Go Cats.